Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for, I think, one of the biggest, most visceral debates happening in pop culture right now.
Oh, yeah.
What exactly makes something culturally relevant? And maybe the bigger question, how can these billion-dollar properties just lose that relevance almost overnight?
It's the eternal question, isn't it? And it's really driven by this core conflict we're all seeing.
For sure.
You've got these massive properties, what the industry calls intellectual properties, IPs. Things like Star Wars, the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
The big ones.
The biggest ones. And they're suddenly facing these existential questions about their place in the world, about market saturation. But then at the very same time, you have content that's decades old.
Right.
Hasn't released anything new in years, and it just refuses to fade away.
Exactly. The definition of relevance, it just feels like this constantly moving, subjective goalpost. You can feel when something is relevant in a conversation.
You know, when you see it.
But nailing down the concrete criteria, the actual sort of measurable rules, that's incredibly tough. So today we are diving into a really comprehensive stack of analysis to try to move beyond vague.
So what's the mission?
Our mission today is to establish, well, a structured class session. We're setting the rules that dictate what separates a successful product from an enduring culture.
And I think we should clarify immediately what we mean when we use that term IP, because it's not just the commercial asset, you know.
Well, not just the brand name and logos.
Exactly. It's not just the monetary value. Yeah. It's the narrative asset, the stories, the characters, and that emotional connection they create.
That's the core of it.
And our goal is to break down the ambiguity around that connection. We want to identify the concrete markers that sustain it, and crucially, the specific destructive forces that cause a once beloved fandom, a once essential culture, to just vanish and leave behind only apathy.
And we should absolutely acknowledge where the spark for this deep dive came from. It's that perpetual online conversation around these market behemoths.
Of course.
We're talking about the endless conveyor belt of Marvel content, the current state of Star Wars, and even the surprisingly useful, if a little humorous, starting point of the analysis we sourced.
Which was?
The conversation around the Avatar.
The Avatar example, which some of the material frames as a joke, is actually a perfect case study for the problem we're trying to solve.
How so?
Well, James Cameron makes billions of dollars. He generates a massive opening weekend. He dominates the box office. Commercially, it's a huge success. No one can argue with that.
A juggernaut.
But the core question remains, does it truly permeate the culture beyond that immediate release window?
Right.
Does the conversation about the characters or the world continue when the marketing budget stops running?
We need a structure for that.
We need a concrete structure to answer that. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into the foundational criteria.
All right, class is officially in session. If you're keeping score at home, we have identified 5 necessary criteria or boxes that an intellectual property has to tick off to be considered truly, fundamentally, culturally relevant.
And if an IP misses even one of these boxes, the analysis suggests its long-term viability, its longevity, it's all immediately in question.
They're like a filter. Right?
They function exactly like a filter. They're designed to separate that fleeting viral success, the huge opening weekend, the momentary Twitter trend, from true foundational endurance that lasts more than a moment in time.
This isn't about being popular for months.
No. It's about building a fortress of relevance that can last for decades.
Okay, so what's the first box?
The first box, the endurance test. It's critical, and it goes right back to that Avatar question we just mentioned. The core criterion here is that the fandom has to exist. It has to be actively quoting and debating and thriving long after the initial theatrical release, the Blu-ray drop, or, the inevitable streaming debut.
So it's about life after the hype cycle.
Precisely. Think about the modern consumption cycle. Everything is built around the drop. If the only time people are actively talking about the IP is during that very narrow window where it's being promoted.
Say 4 to 6 weeks.
Exactly. Then it fails this core test. It might be successful commerce.
But it's not cultural relevance.
Not at all. And this is where we see so many modern phenomena just falter. A film can feel huge for 2 or 3 weeks. It can dominate the box office. And then it's completely forgotten by the time the next blockbuster drops.
If the cultural conversation stops the moment the marketing budget runs out, the content hasn't rooted itself in our conscious, just temporary.
It's a successful product, but it hasn't generated a relevant culture. We're looking at the difference between mass consumption and deep permeation.
Explain that.
Consumption happens when content is new and available. It's novelty-driven. Permeation, though, that happens when the audience internalizes the work and carries it forward themselves, even when the studio isn't forcing new stuff on them.
So it's fan-driven.
This sustained, fan-driven life cycle is the absolute baseline. If the energy is purely corporate, it's not relevant. It's just a mandate.
Okay, that makes sense. Box 1 is endurance. What's box?
Box number 2 is the ability to function as pop culture shorthand. This is how we gauge ubiquity.
So being a common reference.
Exactly. The core criterion says that the IP, a specific quote or a key concept, can be brought up casually in a totally unrelated conversation, and most people, pop culture-wise, will immediately get the reference.
With no explanation needed.
Zero explanation. The source material argues there should be no need for lengthy historical context. If you have to spend 2 minutes setting it up, well, back in 1999 in the second episode of this sci-fi show,
You've already lost.
it's not culturally relevant. The knowledge has to be known and shared universally. It has to function as an instantaneous, frictionless communication tool.
It's the difference between mentioning, say, "you shall not pass," versus trying to reference some complex plot point from an obscure cult classic.
Exactly. One requires no setup, the other requires you to pull up Wikipedia. When something becomes pop culture shorthand, it's transcended its original media. It's now part of the general cultural lexicon.
It's not just a movie anymore.
No, it's a shared societal vocabulary that we all just implicitly understand. That shared literacy is key. It shows the cultural weight of an IP. The easier it can be deployed in unrelated conversations, the more deeply it's penetrated our shared content.
Like, I can say to a friend, "That meeting was a total disaster," and then add, "I have a bad feeling about this."
And you've just layered in a universally recognized Star Wars reference into a sentence about your workday. That ability to just deploy the reference without a pause, that is the true marker of cultural relevance.
Okay, so we have endurance and we have short. Box.
Moving to box 3, the IP must spontaneously produce widely used memes and universally tied quotes.
And I think we need to stress that word, spontaneously.
Oh, absolutely. This criterion builds directly on the second one. It's not enough to just be quotable. The quotes and the meme concepts have to be tied so intrinsically to the IP that using them immediately evokes the source.
And crucially, the studio can't have forced it.
That's the key. The analysis gives a perfect example. The line from Harry Potter, "I solemnly swear I'm up to no good."
Instantly recognizable.
If you use that line as a meme, spoken phrase, on a t-shirt, everyone knows exactly where it comes from, even if they've never read the book. It's an immediate, universal shortcut to the entire world of Hogwarts.
That sense of mischief, the mad.
The universality signals success. It proves the content was evocative and sincere enough to generate its own language. We've certainly seen studios try to engineer quotable moments.
Oh, all the time. In trailers especially.
And it's always disastrous. They fail precisely because they lack that organic sincerity. When quotes are forced, they feel hollow and they just turn into mockery. True relevance generates its own currency. It isn't minted in a focus group. It has to come from a genuine emotional connection.
Makes sense. Okay, what's box 4?
Box 4 is the rediscovery fact. People must repeatedly return to the IP over time. It's not enough that they watched it once and liked it. They have to actively choose to revisit it, maybe months or even years later.
This sounds like more than just nostalgia.
It's a much deeper form of engagement. This is returning to the source material itself. We identified Lord of the Rings as a prime example here.
Absolutely.
I mean, the core trilogy is 2 decades old now, but people are constantly rewatching the extended editions or picking up the books again. And this happens even when there hasn't been major new film content in years.
That sustained need to return suggests the IP holds layers, or it serves some deeper function than just disposable entertainment. It's a commitment to re-immerse yourself because the work rewards.
And critically, this return has to bridge generation. The original fans re-experience it, sure, but the property must also continuously pull in new viewers, a younger demographic seeing it for the first time, and compel them to stay.
If the relevance only exists for people over 40 who saw it in the theater,
the relevance is dying. The IP has to be durable enough to be rediscovered by those who weren't even alive during its initial run.
Okay, that's a big one. So the last box, number 5.
And finally, box 5. Influence on new creators. The IP has to continuously draw new people into its fold and actively shape subsequent creative endeavors.
So it becomes foundational.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a reference point that future generations of writers, directors, artists, game developers, they use it as a baseline or a source of inspiration. It might inspire a whole genre, a style of dialogue, or even narrative choices in totally new, unrelated projects.
If you hear a director in an interview cite a film from 30 years ago as the exact reason they got into film,
that IP is influencing new creators. It's the ultimate validation that the work transcended its moment and became part of the enduring artistic conversation. It's no longer just a story. It's a manual for storytelling.
So to synthesize all 5 points, cultural relevance isn't a birthright. It's not a permanent state granted by a massive again.
It has to be repeatedly earned over time by continuously ticking these boxes by enduring past its release, becoming shorthand, generating organic language, inviting re-immersion, and seeding the next generation of...
The moment an IP rests on its laurels,
the clock starts ticking on its eventual irrelevance.
Okay, that structure makes perfect sense, but it also sounds exhausting for the property. We've defined what relevance. So now what actively maintains it?
It requires an emotional connection. Once you've ticked those 5 boxes, you've earned the audience's attention. Now you have to maintain their affection. That brings us to the sustaining mechanism.
The 3 pillars.
Exactly. And these require a deep internal quality and a profound, often comfortable connection with the audience that goes way beyond spectacle or market dominance.
All right, that brings us to section, the 3 pillars that actively maintain relevance once those 5 boxes. We're moving from diagnosis to the actual mechanism of endurance.
The first pillar is memes and quotability. But, and this is where the analysis gets really nuanced, this pillar cannot be supported by mere irony or quick jokes. It has to pass what the material calls the sincerity test.
A sincerity.
Okay. This is a crucial distinction in today's media landscape. The analysis specifically contrasts properties that endure, like Mean Girls in the Office, with phenomena like Skibby Toilet.
Oh, wow, okay.
These rapid trends are highly memeable, but they lack cultural relevance because they're often nonsensical, they burn out incredibly fast, and they have zero context for anyone outside the immediate trend cycle.
And they actively annoy older audiences because they lack any grounding, any relatable human emotion. They're just viral artifacts designed to disappear.
Not cultural touchstones designed to endure. Lasting relevance requires specific, enduring characteristics in its quotable content. First, adaptability. The lines have to be useful in different real-world situations.
You can use the quote to comment on your own life.
Precisely. Second, tone. The content needs to balance sincerity and humor, making the characters relatable. It can't be purely ironic or purely dramatic. It needs that blend.
And third,
and maybe most important, affection. The memes have to derive from genuine affection and real earned laughter, not mockery or desire for quick, disposable virality. Let's look at the examples that pass this test perfectly.
let's do it.
Mean Girls, released in the early 2000s, is still instantly quotable today. Phrases like, "You can't sit with us," or "Stop trying to make fetch happen."
They've transcended the movie. They're used universally to describe social situations because the movie handles those themes with a recognizable sincerity, even while being darkly funny.
Or take The Office. It's been off the air for over a decade, yet new viewers start it daily, driven by the enduring quotes and memes. Why? Because the memes capture deep, relatable human awkwardness, corporate misery, and genuine affection.
It's not just a quick gag, it's a shared emotional experience distilled into a repeatable line.
And then there's The Princess Bride, a classic film, long past its expiration date, yet constantly referenced on t-shirts, in memes, through quote.
Because its tone is utterly sincere, even when it's completely absurd. That sincerity and affection carry its quotability across generations.
Proving that a quality-contained story can generate eternal meme current.
All right, pillar 1 is sincere quotability. What's pillar?
Pillar 2 takes us into the material realm. Merch as identity, not just product.
This moves beyond just, paying $30.
Way beyond. The item has to actively serve as a profound identifier. This is the concept of signaling. Merch functions best when wearing it signals a shared language or value system to the rest of society.
It moves beyond, this is something I like to.
This is who I am, what I believe in, what community I belong to.
And I can relate to this on a deep personal level. The analysis we looked at included a story I shared that really cemented. Yeah, so it was maybe 2011, 2012. And I was in middle school. I came into orchestra practice wearing this chunky, slightly ridiculous Assassin's Creed hoodie I'd just bought.
Okay.
I sat down to tune my cello, and this kid I barely knew, who sat across the room, he looks at the logo, lowers his bow, and just says, "You play Assassin's Creed."
The signal was received.
Right. And I didn't even have to think about it. I instantly gave the response, the oath. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted, baby.
And there it is.
And in that moment, it wasn't just a video game we liked. The hoodie wasn't just apparel. It was a uniform signifying membership that shared, quote, that understanding. It served as the catalyst for a deep, years-long friendship.
That is the function of relevant merch, an instant social bond, a declaration of self. And that perfectly illustrates why a franchise like Pokemon endures. The merch, the cards, plushies, figures, it has literally carried people from early childhood into adulthood. It's a continuous presence across life stages.
The same applies to Harry Potter. The merch allows for self-identification. People don those items not just as something I like, but as part of their perceived persona, aligning with Gryffindor or Slytherin.
But we also have to look at the failure mode. Merch can actively hurt relevance when it's handled poorly. It fails when it's oversaturated, making it feel cheapened. It fails when it's tied to characters that fans don't actually love or care about.
But the biggest failure is when the merch starts to feel like corporate slop.
Yes. when it lacks any emotional meaning beyond just moving unit. It breaks the identity signal and just becomes clutter. It tells people, I bought this, not I am this.
Okay, that's a huge distinction. That brings us to the final pillar.
The final, and in many ways the most important pillar, rewatchability and comfort, the emotional anchor. Content truly endures if it provides a profound emotional connection and triggers comfort, often going far beyond simple nostalgia.
If people are willing to return to content repeatedly, not because they feel obligated to, but because they enjoy the mere presence that speaks volume, it's reliable comfort food for the brain.
The examples are universally relatable. Many of us have watched The Office or Friends multiple times, sometimes just having it on as background. Why?
Because there's something profoundly comforting about it. You know exactly what you're going to get, and it provides maximum emotion.
And that comfort metric is precisely why Friends is still a mass 30 years later. Perpetually rewatched.
We also see this with narrative masterpieces like Avatar, The Last Airbender. The source notes that even adults in their late 20s and 30s are still rewatching.
They identify with the character's growth and find deep joy and comfort in the narrative integrity. It's a testament to its quality that people return to it as a source of emotion.
And of course, Lord of the Rings. The films told a massive, epic story that was perfectly contained. People find comfort in that journey. So
we have this shared recipe for properties that achieve this deep comfort. Friends, ATLA, LOTR, and the analysis identifies 3 crucial traits they all share. First, emotional consistency. The characters behave in ways that feel true to who they are. Second, satisfying conclusion. The narrative payoff rewards the fans' time and emotional investment.
Third, the one that defines whether an IP survives or dies.
No retroactive contempt for the audience. That third point is the crucial linchpin. It means the creators or the current keyhole do not, in retrospect, undermine or belittle the affection, the time, or the theories the audience invested.
And the material notes this by contrasting the consistency of something like The Office with the experience of Star Wars, where the audience sometimes feels actively disliked by the creative decision.
When an IP provides consistent comfort, rewards the audience's time, and avoids invalidating our affection, it builds deep and enduring trust.
And when
the IP falls into one of the 3 killer categories, and that, unfortunately, is our next destination.
We shift now from the sustaining forces to the destructive one. It seems like cultural relevance, once it's built, is surprisingly fragile. It's built on trust and affection, and it can be lost rapidly.
Oh, shockingly fast. And the analysis identifies 3 primary killers that actively destroy an IP standing. And this isn't just about making one bad movie or an unpopular decision.
No, these are patterns.
Patterns that demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding, or worse, disrespect of the fan base that built the property in the first place.
So, killer number 1.
Killer 1 is betrayal, and the source material deems this the gravest offense. This doesn't happen after the first episode. It happens after a fan has made a significant long-term emotional investment.
We're talking about someone who has dedicated years to analyzing character arcs, collecting merch, predicting satisfying payoffs.
Someone who has watched a show for 10 seasons or read 6 massive fantasy novels, investing hundreds of hours into theorizing and forming deep, genuine emotional bonds.
That time is precious.
That emotional energy is the lifeblood of the IP, and the mechanic of betrayal is simple. Endings or major narrative choices are made that essentially invalidate all that previous time and emotional effort. The teased payoff just never materializes in a satisfying way.
The whole journey feels like a weight.
And the response, critically, isn't just perpetual anger. The analysis highlights what we call the apathy effect. Fans stop being angry, which still requires engagement, and they simply leave.
They throw away the t-shirts, they get rid of the keychains, and they stop thinking about the fandom entirely. They feel cheated.
Apathy is infinitely worse than hate. Hate still implies passion. Apathy, however, signifies complete terminal disengagement. The audience decides the product is not worth their emotional energy, positive or negative.
And commercially, that's a death knell. It destroys future consumer confidence, kills the resale market, and eliminates the word of mouth that attracts new fans.
And we have a definitive, horrifying case study for this, cited in the source, Game of Thrones, a show that was arguably the most culturally relevant property in the world, whose final season effectively invalidated years of meticulous plot setup and character development.
That betrayal broke the core promise of the narrative contract. Characters like Daenerys Targaryen saw years of consistent development rushed into a single, nonsensical decision. The ultimate choice for the throne felt...
The fans didn't feel rewarded. They felt dismissed. And that breach of trust led to a rapid, complete loss of relevance. People don't talk about Game of Thrones.
It now sits in the pit where Game of Thrones now rotting.
Power.
Okay, that's a bleak one. What's Killer 2?
Killer 2 is overproduction without meaning. The money hunger.
The constant churn.
Creating an endless, mandatory stream of content solely for consumption and monetary gain, rather than crafting stories with genuine care.
But it's vital to contrast this with, say, valid prolificity.
Yes, absolutely. The analysis cites Final Fantasy, which has 16 mainline games plus countless spin-offs. That's incredibly prolific. But it works because each mainline entry tries to tell a separate, high-quality story made with care.
So everyone can find at least one game to love.
Exactly. The quality control remains high, but the negative example, the disengagement driver, is the post-Endgame fatigue from the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Ah, yes. After the massive payoff of Endgame, the IP shifted into this constant mandatory barrage of content. TV shows, movies, specials, all connected.
And this constant churn meant audiences felt they had to consume everything just to keep up. Suddenly, the joy of watching a movie turned into homework.
Wait, but is it fair to lump the entire MCU post-Endgame into this, or has some quality still been produced?
That's a great question, because individual quality does still exist. But the problem isn't the occasional quality piece. The problem is the pace. The constant stream of releases means the importance of any individual piece is diluted by the sheer volume of material around it.
The commercial goal has clearly superseded the creative.
The focus shifts from enjoying a piece of art to completing a checklist of required viewing. And that ultimately damages the long-term cultural standing. It violates that endurance box we talked about because the audience is conditioned to expect more, faster, and therefore they care less about any single piece.
Okay, that's a dangerous path. So what's the final killer? Number 3.
Killer 3 is perhaps the most insidious, and the analysis argues it kills relevance faster and more terminally than anything: hostility toward the audience.
This happens when the creators, the directors, or key figures actively talk down to...
They dismiss criticism as a moral or personal failure, or they frame passionate fans as toxic simply for voicing disappointment.
The impact is immediate and profound. Fandoms are built on shared affection, a feeling of belonging. When creators make fans feel unwelcome, that energy just evaporates.
The energy required to maintain anger against the content creators themselves is exhausting, so the audience simply disengages quietly. They stop watching, stop buying, stop caring.
The fandom doesn't usually fight back indefinitely, they just leave.
The primary example cited for this damaging hostility is, inevitably, Star Wars, particularly concerning some of the creative decisions in the sequel. When fans feel their long-term investment is being actively rejected or mocked by the people holding the keys to the castle,
that affection and trust are instantly annihilated. The fans don't want to fight, they want a home. If the creators make that home toxic, the fans will seek relevance.
It's a completely self-inflicted wound. By calling fans toxic, you ensure the fandom itself becomes genuinely unsustainable. You're trading long-term relevance for a short-term defense of a creative choice.
So we have the definition, the substance. Now let's look at the properties that somehow defy gravity. The IPs that sustain relevance purely on the strength of their origin, even despite long gaps content.
These properties offer a crucial, counterintuitive lesson to modern producers. Silence is often better than noise, especially if that noise is bad. A quality original builds a foundation that is almost impossible to erode.
We look at IPs that survive decades of silence. Alien, Jurassic Park. Even before recent sequels, they were always there. The analysis points out you couldn't kick a rock in a Comic-Con without hitting some form of alien merch.
These IPs maintained relevance because they possess a really strong identity. They aren't generic blockbusters. They stake their claim early as self-contained original work, true classics that are almost impossible to erase from the blackboard of pop culture.
Their foundation is
absolutely solid, built on narrative perfection and thematic resonance. Think about Jaws. It's a perfect, contained piece of filmmaking that stands alone.
It doesn't require constant validation from new entries because the original is flawless. The original Jurassic Park, too, is a classic of cinema, defined by its terror and the philosophical question.
And this leads to that critical, counterintuitive lesson for modern IP holders. Silence or a lack of content does not kill relevance.
What kills?
Relevance is killed by watering it down with reboots and sequels that disrespect previously established lore or lower the overall quality bar.
And the analysis uses the later Jurassic World movies as a specific critique here, suggesting they often detract from the overall esteem of the franchise.
They shift the focus from sophisticated questions about science and control to just generic spectacle and monster chases. They dilute the strong identity that the original established, threatening the property's long-term endurance.
So when an IP relies on its original strength, a few decades of silence just preserves the reverence.
But when the keyholders panic and start churning out noise, the definition of Killer 2, they risk actively undermining the foundational quality that made the IP relevant in the first place.
Okay, so this brings us to the conclusion of the core analysis, the ultimate formula for longevity, which operates regardless of output volume.
We can synthesize everything we've covered, the 5 boxes, the 3 pillars, the 3 killers, into 3 core ingredients. If you are an IP holder, these are your unbreakable commandments.
Let's hear them.
1. Trust in the IP. This is shown through consistency and adherence to core values and character law. You avoid betrayal. 2. Affection for the IP. This is that emotional connection built over time through sincere, quality storytelling and rewatchability. The IP has to remain a source of comfort.
And the last one.
3. Restraint from the keyholder. The crucial ability to not churn out garbage to make a buck, protecting the integrity of the original work by limiting the volume of content.
Restraint is arguably the hardest thing for a modern IP practice, especially with corporate pressure to maximize.
But according to this deep dive, that very restraint is what ultimately protects the long-term health and cultural standing. It's a self-regulatory mechanism against overproduction and betrayal.
So what's the final warning?
The final warning provided by the analysis is stark. Once these 3 ingredients are lost, and the source points to properties like Star Trek and Doctor Who as other examples struggling with a loss of fan trust.
Then what?
No amount of spin-offs, memes, or merchandise can bring the property back from the brink. It can't be recovered from that pit where Game of Thrones now sits rotting.
Because the fan base has lost trust, affection, and the belief that the content will be treated with respect. At that point, they stop caring and they move on. They find a new home. Wow. This is a profoundly structured breakdown that successfully moved the needle past "I just like it" or "it's popular." We've established the 5 boxes for definition, 3 pillars for sustenance, and the 3 killers.
The framework provides a really valuable tool for understanding why some properties are just commercial successes that vanish in a year, and why others become durable, enduring cultural institutions. It forces us to analyze the motives behind new content.
So what does this all mean for the future of entertainment, especially with this trend toward expanded universe?
Well, it leads to an important philosophical distinction, which is the final takeaway from our sources. Cultural relevance does not equal quality. But quality is absolutely necessary for relevance. The current market trend of leaning too heavily into the franchise model, the idea that everything has to be a multiverse, everything has to be a massive, expanded IP, is often killing a lot of great movies and great things that are little baby IPs that never needed to be expanded on.
It suggests that forcing relevance through scale often destroys the sincerity and restraint required to sustain it. It's a case of creative overreach actively damaging the initial spark.
Precisely. We've established the criteria that define the culture's consensus, but at the end of the day, while we know cultural relevance is a moving goalpost, the ability to love and respect an IP remains entirely a personal.
You don't need culture's permission to find comfort in something.
Not at all. Regardless of whether The Princess Bride is currently charting on streaming or whether Game of Thrones is now rotting in the critical consciousness, your personal enjoyment and affection are completely separate, durable metrics.
So we encourage you to reflect on your own favorites. Which of your beloved fandoms are currently sitting on the brink of one of those 3 killers? And which of your surprisingly enduring niche favorites defy all these rules and remain a personal, quiet, emotional?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the anatomy of cultural relevance. We hope this framework helps you analyze the properties you love and maybe the properties you used to love.